Hey Jews, we're going to continue reading the book of Esther from Loaz. We're trying to understand our reality by learning the wisdom of God and understanding how what we learn is relevant for us in our time, and how the opportunities that we have in our time are also related to spiritual energies that are available. So we are focusing on March 13th, the 13th of Adar, which is the fast of Esther, which is a spiritually auspicious time for the Jews to repent and to return to God. We understand that this whole creation was created with wisdom. We understand that in order to have an understanding of the wisdom, we have to have first knowledge of that information, which is in the Torah. And we have to obtain a high enough spiritual level. Our soul needs to be purified to a certain extent that we will understand the wisdom. So understanding our reality, just the physical part, the material part, the part that we can experience, that's this kind of level of understanding. And I think after the events of our recent history, there should be a lot of questions as if to, do we really understand our material, physical level of reality? Do we understand that? Is the information that we have of knowledge of, have we based our belief system or our faith in, have we put our faith in the right things? Those are some things that we should be asking ourselves, especially as Jews now, this year, 5785, which is in the period of the end times. And I've gone over this so many, I think the 12 people that are watching this series, thank you very much, by the way. We've already explained this, so we're just going to try to keep moving on. Now, what I can say is that over time, we know that the spiritual level of the nation, the holy nation that's supposed to be following these laws in order to keep our souls pure and holy, in order that we will have any of this higher understanding of the wisdom, because it is in fact this knowledge of this wisdom that we should be building our belief systems on. And when we do understand reality based on the wisdom, and that's our belief system, we can start now to understand what it means to have faith in God, in the Torah, in the holy nation of Israel, and all of the smarter, more spiritually elevated people that came in our past. So if this is us here now at the end time, 5785, we're at a very low level of spirituality. Conversely, in this time, we are in a higher level of technology and science. So it's upside down, because the information and knowledge that should be guiding reality, and especially the holy nation, all of the Jews, the information that we are supposed to be understanding and basing our belief systems on, is not what we can measure and understand and trust the science and all of that stuff. Our understanding, our belief system is based on the knowledge of the wisdom, on the understanding of the wisdom that God created the reality by. And we also know that there are laws in place, and God created the reality with wisdom. There's cause and effect that happen. When the Jews do not learn the Torah and uphold the laws of the Torah, then our spiritual level falls over time, and all of that light that should have, all of the spiritual light that should have come into our world to go towards our spiritual level to keep it high. Because again, we need both an intellectual, like a conscious level plus a higher spiritual level that would equal a God awareness. Because currently, we cannot perceive God on this level of understanding. We can't test something. We have no conclusive evidence that with our physical body, meaning our physical eyes and our brain and our whatever, we can't experience God. If we experience some sort of tangible aspect of spirituality, probably at this time, we can just assume that it's not from the holy side, okay? So it's not from the holy side. We are at the end of time. We are at a very, very, very low spiritual level. Back then at the first temple, they could perceive a high spiritual level of our reality. All of the light that was coming in to fuel that information was going from the Jews in the first temple, and it was keeping us at a high spiritual level, and to the point where there were trees that would give a golden fruit. This is a story, this is a concept, that the concept is that if we were at a very high spiritual level, seeing something like a tree in the temple that gave golden fruit at the right time, just like a tree in our physical reality would give like an apple at the right time. So in the spiritual level of reality, we experience that even in a physical reality where we saw, and the Kohanim there would sell that golden apple. So that's the level of, we should be able to see that if we were at a high spiritual level. But because we're at such a low spiritual level, we're seeing increases in technology. All of that light that's coming in to either fuel this or this is going here. And it's going here because the Jews are not keeping the Torah laws, not learning the Torah in order to understand the wisdom for the right reason. So again, we're reading the Megillah, not just to read it, not just to celebrate Purim every year. Like, are you happy celebrating Purim, Jews? Does that make you happy? I mean, we don't actually, yes, after the redemption, we will still celebrate Purim, but we're not doing these holidays just to keep doing them until we die. Like, we should actually be thinking about rebuilding the temple. We should actually be thinking about having a high enough consciousness and a high enough spiritual level in order to have God awareness. That is the point of being a Jew. That's the point, is to understand the wisdom. We don't need godly wisdom to tell us obvious things in our reality. We don't need godly wisdom, and we don't need the godly wisdom written in the Torah for the nation in order to point out the fact that Zionism is not Judaism. The Goyim are also telling us that Zionism is not Judaism. We can see that Zionists have laws that are not the Torah laws. They have laws that are opposite the Torah laws. The Zionist state of Israel is one of the most gay-friendly places on earth. The Holy Land is now the surprising refuge for LGBTQ. That's not holy. We don't need the Torah to tell us that's not holy. We don't need godly wisdom to tell us that that's not holy. He wrote it down there in the Torah that it's an abomination. So when we see in our time such a low level that these rabbis that are telling us that Zionism is not Judaism. Great, thank you very much. Thank you for telling us the most basic level understanding that even the Goyim are telling us. And you are calling yourself a Gaon Shlita. Everyone is a genius telling us the most basic understanding of the story these days, when a genius really was somebody who was at a high spiritual whatever that could interpret this wisdom that we don't need the Goyim to tell us. Also, we don't need the wisdom of the Torah to tell you to not steal your neighbor's parking spot every single time. That's common courtesy. That's common courtesy. You don't see that anywhere else but religious areas in the land of Israel with these genius rabbis running the show. We have to understand at some point that we are doing all these things not to just do them. We're doing them to get a result. And the result that we want is actually the redemption. How do we do that? We do exactly the exact same thing that they did initially in Purim, in the middle of our story. We finally understand that the Jews are not supposed to just be here like every other nation, just going to Eurovision and singing the Song of Songs. That's not understanding anything. What we need to understand is that the Jews are separate. We're different. We have these laws, the Torah laws. When we uphold these laws, then we will be redeemed, which is what we want. We don't want to just keep going on and on and on and on and on in this reality, which is hostile to the Jews. We don't want to just make them put in, anti-Semitic laws not allow them to tell us that Zionism isn't Judaism. We want to just shut everybody up because they're anti-Semitic means they're not telling the truth. That's not true. That's not true. They're literally telling us sometimes the truth, sometimes not, but anyway. So that's what I have to say as my introduction, and we will continue 6:10. We just will remind ourselves that at this point, Haman was plotting to hang Mordecai. He was excited to go to the second feast that Queen Esther had invited him and the king to. But he was having trouble feeling happy because Mordecai still wouldn't bow down to him because he's a Jew, and Jews don't bow down to anyone except for God, not to any crooked Gaon rabbis, that's for sure. And so his wife and his friends said, hey, why don't you just hang him from a very high scaffold and that you can see from your feast, and then you'll enjoy it when you see the Jew swinging in the wind there. So that's what he did. And then the king couldn't sleep, and he discovered that he had not rewarded Mordecai for saving his life. And he had a dream that Haman wanted to usurp his kingdom, basically, and kill him and Esther. So 6:10, the king said to Haman, hurry. So he asked, when Haman came in, he asked Haman, what do you suggest we do for somebody that the king wants to honor? And Haman thought it was him, so he suggested very interesting, nice things that would not, but just in case it wasn't him, they would be temporary. So he said we should do lots of things like dress him in royal robes and have him ride throughout the streets on the king's own horses. 6:10, the king said to Haman, hurry, take the robes and horse as you said, and do this for Mordecai the Jew who's sitting at the king's gate. Do not leave out anything you mentioned. You think that you are the only one I want to honor? Well, go ahead and take the robes and the horse, but not for yourself. Provide the honor that you discussed for Mordecai. Today, Esther will come to the party, and I'm sure that she will ask me why I didn't reward Mordecai for saving my life. You must rush and complete everything before the feast today. You're disappointed, but that's no reason for delay. Just because you oppose Mordecai, don't drag your heels. Hurry and get the robes and the horse. And don't think that you'll get by with taking Mordecai through the back alleys. Do just as you said. Lead him right through the main boulevard. I know you thought that you were asking very much. You assumed that I would never give such an honor to anyone. But this man saved my life. Do everything that you said without omitting a single item. The robes and horse are extremely valuable, and I would not trust them to just anybody. If you yourself must fetch them. You yourself must make the announcements you mentioned. Don't say that it's beneath your dignity and that Mordecai is a mere commoner. He is an important official sitting in the king's gate. An indignity for you, perhaps. But Mordecai, not you, uncovered the conspiracy of Bigtham and Teresh. You truly deserve to be his slave. Haman's head was whirling. He couldn't think. Anything to buy a little time to delay. Your Majesty, I have no idea who this Mordecai is. I'm speaking about Mordecai the Jew. But there are so many Jews named Mordecai. Don't you see, Your Majesty? He's no different from all the other Jews. I already bought from you the right to do with him as I please. If he's a Jew, he belongs to me. How can I lower myself for him? You know very well which Mordecai I mean. He's the one who sits at the king's gate. Yes, Haman, I mean, I might have sold you all the Jews. But do you actually think that I would sell you even my own advisors and officials? Although Mordecai is a Jew, he is one of my chief ministers. You have no power over him. Aloud the king said, I know of your jealousy of Mordecai, but you must remember that Mordecai is one of the chief officials, one who sits at the king's gate. He has a high position in the government since the beginning of my reign, just as you have. I also know something about what happened during the Indian campaign and Mordecai's reasons for not bowing to you. As I understand it, he has a good reason to remain seated in the king's gate as you pass by. Remember that Haman and Mordecai were both leaders of the king's armies, and Haman wasted all his provisions, and he asked Mordecai for some of his, and so he became Mordecai's slave. So Haman's plotting mind had an argument ready. But your majesty, true, if you wish to honor a person, you give him all this and more. But I never thought that you meant the Jew Mordecai. I thought that we had an understanding about how we feel about those Jews. I didn't realize that you were paying a debt of honor. I merely assumed that you wanted to give a special honor to one of your subjects. Honor and debt are very different. There's no limit to the honor that your majesty can give, but if it's only a debt, you should give no more than what you owe. Otherwise, you may provide a bad precedent. How can you take a commoner like Mordecai and let him ride the coronation horse and wear your robes of state? It denigrates your position. If you want to reward him, give him a city or provide him with some profitable business. Mordecai is poor, and something like that will make him happier than anything. There was impatience in the king's voice. The idea came from your very lips. I desire that you do just that. Do not leave out anything that you mentioned. I know that you do not have my interests at heart. If I favor someone, you hate him. And if I hate someone, you take him as an ally. But this time, my desire will be done and not yours. Your majesty, I beg you, pleaded Haman, don't humiliate me like this before all the people. I confess to everything. This man whom you want to honor is my arch enemy. How can I honor him? I built a gallows in my yard especially for him, and I came this very morning to seek permission to hang him. There, I've said it. I've admitted it. Now you are taking this person and placing him higher than me. Enough words, said the king. No more delay. Go to the royal storehouse and get one of the valuable purple robes that I have, and get one of the valuable purple robes that I have, embroidered with gold and encrusted with jewels. Bring the Macedonian crown that the citizens of Crane gave me on the first day of my reign. Fetch the fine sword that was given me from Ethiopia. Get the cloak that was given me by the citizens of Africa. Bring the horse upon which I rode on the day of my coronation, the horse called Shifragez. Bring all these things to Mordecai and do all that you have described. A great feeling of despair overcame Haman, and he began to tremble, feign ignorance, and try to delay. Try to get some time to recollect your thoughts. Maybe an idea will come up. But your majesty, I don't know at which gate he's sitting. You say a king's gate, but the king has many gates. If you insist, I'll give you directions. It's the gate through which one must pass when coming from the harem to the palace. I beg your majesty, this man is our ancestral enemy. If I were to do this, I would be going against all my ancestral teachings. Please, let me give Mordecai 10,000 loaves of silver. Just let me get out of this humiliation. So, once again, Jews, there's 70 different nations. 70 nations and one nation of Israel. Now, the 70 nations, a lot of them have traditions from their heritage, of traditions of their fathers, the traditions of their lineage, the traditions passed down to them from father to son, father to son. And guess what? So do we. The nation of Israel has traditions passed down from us, from father to son, father to son, father to son, from the time we became the holy nation, when we accepted the laws of the Torah. And the tradition is to learn the Torah, to keep Shabbat, to keep kosher, to keep separate from the nation. So there are still the enemies of the nation that follow their traditions, which tell them to hate the Jews, to seek their destruction in every generation, even if not on a cognitive level, on a conscious level, on some sort of subconscious level. But what about us Jews? Question. So he says that this is an ancestral teaching. Please, let me give him 10,000 loaves of silver. Just let me get out of this humiliation. Since he saved the king's life, he deserves to be spared when the Jews are taken care of. I will give him the same 10,000 loaves of silver that I was going to have to give to you to kill the Jews. All right, give him the money. After all, he deserves it. From what I understand, you once sold yourself to him as a slave. He deserves your house and all your property. But you won't get out of providing him with all the honor that you described. You are under orders to attend to every last detail. Remember, we read also in a previous video that the Rashaim don't have full control over the words that they say, and their words trip them up. So don't make me do it. If it must be done, let it be done by one of my sons. They are very important men. Some of them can even run in front of the horse. You, your wife, and all your children will serve Mordecai. Do not leave out anything that you mentioned. Your Majesty, I ask you to consider carefully what you are doing. You will be denigrating one of your highest officials, and respect for authority will suffer. Mordecai is a commoner and does not deserve such an honor. Make him ruler over some small village, and he will be more than satisfied. I will make him governor over all of my satrapies. He will be famous and powerful throughout the empire. But the honor that you have described must be done for him with nothing omitted. Your Majesty, no one but you and I have the power to mint coins of the realm. Are you going to lower me to be before a commoner? You are not speaking about a mere commoner. You are speaking about the man who saved the king's life. There is no limit to the reward that I will give him. Instead of you, Mordecai will mint the coin of the realm. You did everything in your power to save Bigthan and Teresh and to prevent me from rewarding Mordecai. Now I no longer trust you to hold my signet ring. None of my subjects are as loyal as Mordecai. Now do as I have ordered. Haman realized that the king would not be moved. In desperation, he said, as your Majesty knows, I have sent a letter to all 127 satrapies of your empire to kill the Jews, the people of Mordecai. I admit that I did it for selfish purposes. I was furious with Mordecai for not bowing to me according to the king's instructions. The excuse he gave was that he was a Jew. I therefore wanted to kill him and in the process to get rid of all of the Jews. But now I see that you favor Mordecai and I will not have power over him. Do me a favor and send out a letter retracting the first letter. Give orders that no man dare to raise a hand against any Jew. This should be more than ample reward for Mordecai. He will bless you and me both. You no longer have any power over the Jews. If you are Mordecai's slave, any rights of his people that you purchased belong to him. I will annul the letters that you have sent, but you must do all the things that you have described for Mordecai. Kill me, anything, but don't make me do this. Better I should die than suffer such shame. Stop with the dramatics. Just do as I have said. If you want, I will kill you too. But now don't delay. Sarcastically, the king added, see, Haman, look how important you are to me. Whatever you say, I do. Nothing you said was in vain. Mordecai will get all the honors that you have mentioned, but none of it will exempt you from carrying out my orders. Ahasuerus was willing to let Mordecai have such a great honor, even though he hated the Jews. His hatred for the Jews was not blind prejudice, but the result of fear that they would rebel and take over his kingdom. The royal astrologer had predicted that a Jew would wear the king's crown, and Ahasuerus did not realize that it denoted Darius II, who would be his son through Esther. Now the king saw a simple solution: let Mordecai wear his crown at the parade. This would be sufficient to fulfill the prophecy. He would have nothing more to fear. Therefore, when Haman tried to stop the king from giving Mordecai this honor, the king instantly insisted relentlessly. No more foolish debates. Haman, Haman, said the king, hurry up and do it. Don't you dare leave anything out. 6:11. Haman took the robes and the horse and dressed Mordecai. He led him on horseback through the main boulevard of the city and called before him, "Thus shall be done to the man whom the king wishes to honor." Seeing that he had no choice, Haman went to the royal storehouse, depressed and defeated. He was in a state of shock and could hardly walk. He took the king's coronation robes and placed them on his shoulder. Then he went to the royal stables and got the king's first horse. Trembling, he went to Mordecai. Mordecai had his head covered with his talit, and he was reciting the Shema in the morning prayers. As he finished, he saw Haman approaching, and seeing the horse, assumed he was coming to kill him. "Flee for your lives," he said to his students. "No, master," they replied. "We will not flee. We will stand with you in life and in death." Mordecai began to teach them the laws of bringing the omer, the barley offering brought on the first day of Passover, described in Leviticus 23:9-14. It was the first day of Passover, and when the temple stood, the omer would be offered in Jerusalem. Now Mordecai was reviewing the laws so that the study would be counted as actual practice. Right now, Jews, when we do not have the temple and do not have the ability to do some of the mitzvot, of which there are a lot of them, instead of that, learning the laws is like counted as basically doing them, so that it would be counted as actual practice. So when we say also all the things that we say in the morning prayers about the korban, about the offerings, like the tamid offering, which was the daily offering that helped to erase our sins, which would keep us at a high spiritual level. So even if somebody sinned accidentally or whatever they did there, the offering at the temple, the tamid offering especially, which was a day and night, which would just erase the sins of the nation. So now that we do not have that, our prayers do that same thing. So why do you think that when less and less and less and less Jews pray, our spiritual level falls down? Because the prayers are supposed to be instead of the sacrifices. So what is Mordecai discussing? Asked Haman. The laws of the Omer, the offering that God instructed us to bring in our temple in Jerusalem. What is this offering? Was it gold? Was it silver? Nothing like that. It was an offering of barley. Barley, and for that your God protects you? Your handful of barley has outweighed the 10,000 loaves of silver that I offered to the king? Haman was speaking loud enough for Mordecai to hear him. What did Haman mean that the barley outweighed his silver? Obviously, he came here to taunt us. We all know that he has signed our death warrant. "Let me eat a little bread," said Haman. He said to Haman, "Let me drink a little water. You will have your way with us. If it's God's will, we have no other choice but to accept it. We have sinned too much for him to have received our prayers." After the temple was destroyed, it's like there was a barrier put between God and his nation. So even when we do pray, it's very hard for us to get our prayers heard, apparently. So there's certain things like tears. When you cry, the gates of tears are never closed. So when you cry with all your heart, your prayers are accepted. If you're ever wondering, like, I pray to God. I don't keep kosher. I don't keep Shabbat. I don't do any of the holidays. I don't ever fast. But when I pray to God, he doesn't answer my prayers. Yeah, it's hard to get our prayers heard. That's why on auspicious times, it's very important that we make use of these auspicious spiritual times. Seek Hashem when he is close to us. So Mordecai says to him that he has very little strength. So it says, we've sinned too much for him to have received our prayers. Haman could barely open his lips. Mordecai, saint, come. God always does miracles for you. I planned evil for you, but I am suffering for it. Rise and let me dress you with these royal robes. Get up on the king's horse. The king has given me orders, and I dare not disobey. Where's your respect? Replied Mordecai. Don't you see that I'm wearing sackcloth and ashes? Should I put on the king's robes without first bathing? Don't you have any respect for the king? Before I put on the royal robes, I have to have a bath and a haircut. I've been fasting for 3 days and 3 nights, and I have very little strength. Esther had heard that Mordecai was to be paraded throughout the city and honored for saving the king's life. She issued orders that all the stores and businesses should be closed so that everyone could witness the parade. When Haman tried to find a bathhouse and barber shop, none were open. Finally, Haman had no other choice but to heat the water and to draw a bath for Mordecai. Since this was not included in the king's order, it was all the more difficult for him to do. But he had seen the king's anger, and he was afraid that the king would suspect him of disobedience. He therefore had to bathe Mordecai with his own hands. Haman then went to find a barber to cut Mordecai's hair, but he could not find one. They had all closed their shops and were waiting for the big parade. Haman wanted to call one of his slaves to cut Mordecai's hair, but Mordecai would not agree. Someone else would harm him out of hatred and then say that it was an accident. Haman would realize that the king was keeping an eye on everything he did. Not having any alternative, Haman went home and got his scissors and other equipment. As he cut Mordecai's hair, he was sighing and moaning. "What are you moaning about?" asked Mordecai. "Imagine," replied Haman, "an important man like me, the one whom the king raised above all the other governors. I run the entire kingdom, and now I'm reduced to being a mere barber. Is this what happens to a man whom the king wants to honor?" "You speak as if it's something you never did before," said Mordecai, "but I know very well that you and your father were barbers and bath attendants in the city of Circesium. That's why you have the scissors and other barber's equipment." The haircut finished, Haman dressed Mordecai in the royal robes and placed a crown upon his head. "Come, mount the horse," said Haman. "I can't," replied Mordecai. "I'm far too weak for my long fast." Haman was desperate. He had to follow the king's orders. "Come, mount the horse. I'll bow down. You can climb up on me." Very fitting, thought Mordecai, a fulfillment of the verse. "Your enemies shall shrink before you, and you shall step on their highest ones." Deuteronomy 33:29, which is what would happen if the Jews would just follow the Torah and reestablish this connection by fasting and crying out to him. Mordecai had some apprehension about taking a haircut and riding the horse, since it was Passover, and these things are forbidden on the festival. But thousands of Jewish lives were at stake. By accepting the king's honor, he might be able to save them. Where lives are at stake, such laws can be ignored. Mordecai mounted the horse and began to praise God. "I will praise you, O my God, for you have lifted me up, and I have not allowed my enemies to make merry with me." 27,000 men carrying gold cups and pillows marched before Mordecai, all chanting, "Thus shall be done to the man whom the king desires to honor." All the Jewish men followed Mordecai, overflowing with happiness. Jewish women who could not leave home watched from the windows and looked up and took up the chant, "Thus shall be done for the man whom the king desires to honor." Esther stepped forward to greet Mordecai. Seeing him riding the royal horse and wearing the robes of state, she offered thanks to God. She said to Mordecai, "It is a fulfillment of the verse, God lifts up the impoverished from the dust, from the dung heap he raises the hopeless." Tehillim 113:7. Because of your sackcloth and ashes, God has raised you up in this manner. The parade soon passed in front of Haman's house. Haman's daughter was looking out the window. She saw one man leading the horse, totally dejected and broken. She saw one man leading the horse, totally dejected and broken. A second man was riding on the horse, his face beaming like the sun. Of course, father went to the palace this morning to get Mordecai hung. The one on the horse must be father, and Mordecai must be leading the horse. What a perfect chance to humiliate Mordecai. She carefully waited until until the one leading the horse was right under her window. With a curse, she emptied her chamber pot right over his head, assuming it was Mordecai. The vile contents of her pant landed right on Haman's head. He looked up to see who had done such a terrible thing to him. At that moment, his daughter recognized that it was her father. Out of shock, she fell from the window and was killed in the fall. 6:12. Mordecai returned to the king's gate. Haman was rushed home, despondent and hiding his face. Mordecai returned to the Sanhedrin, who were amassed at the king's gate. He took off his royal robes and continued his fast. He put on sackcloth and sat in ashes, praying until the evening. He also asked all the Jews to go to the synagogue and pray for divine intervention. Actually, Mordecai was quite apprehensive about this honor. He said to the assembled people, "I had hoped that I would be able to have an audience with the king and to ask him to retract a decree. But now he has already repaid me for saving his life. I've lost all the possible leverage that I had with the king. Our only hope is now in God." Meanwhile, Haman tried to get home as fast as possible. No one seemed to recognize him. The parade crowds jostled him wherever he tried to pass. People used to push each other aside to see him as he paraded down the streets, and now they were pushing him aside. Besides, he smelled terrible from the stinking filth that had been poured over him, and people pushed him away in the streets. Haman hurried through the streets. He was despondent because of the loss of his favorite daughter. He had planned for her to be queen, and this is what had come of it. He hid his head in shame. His own daughter had cursed him and poured indescribable filth over his head. He was so ashamed that he did not want anyone to recognize him. He closed his eyes and pushed his way through the crowd like a blind man. In one morning, he had fallen from the greatest heights to the lowest depths. 6:13. Haman told his wife Zeresh and all his friends what had happened to him. All his wise men and his wife Zeresh said to him, "If Mordecai is the offspring of Jews, once you have begun to fall before him, you will never overcome him. You will fall more and more and more before him." When Haman's advisors heard about his troubles, they came to comfort him for the loss of his favorite daughter and to commiserate with him for all that had happened to him. Haman was ashamed to tell his friends how he had been humiliated. He only told his wife, and the news eventually reached his friends. Well, his wife doesn't mind telling everyone. Earlier, when Haman had returned home in triumph after the first feast, Haman had summoned his wife and his friends. Now, however, he did not summon them. The advice that they had given him did not turn out well, and he was not anxious to see them. Haman's family and friends sought to give him advice, but they were so distraught that they couldn't even think straight. Finally, a few of his wise men summoned the courage to speak up, and Zeresh agreed to their words. Zeresh's advice had gotten him in trouble, and she did not dare speak up first anymore. Haman's wise men had a plan, but they never got to tell it to him. Before they could finish their words, the king's guards came to bring Haman to the second feast. Seeing the confusion on the faces of his wife and friends, Haman tried to comfort them. He said, "Don't think that I have confronted Mordecai and have lost. I will still hang that Mordecai." The king knew that he owed Mordecai a great debt and was afraid that he would be asked for the lives of his people in payment. Now that the king has paid the debt by honoring Mordecai, he does not have any more leverage with the king. He has gotten more than he deserves, and now I will find some excuse to have him hanged. Don't worry about what happened today. He got away from me this time, but won't get away again. What happened was not so terrible. It was only a matter of bad luck. My luck can't always be bad. The stars are now smiling on the Jews, but next time they'll smile on me. His wise men pondered his words. They replied, "What you say might be true of all the other nations, but not of the Jews. Their destiny is not bound to the stars. They are likened both to the dust and to the stars. They can be as low as the dust, and suddenly they can be higher than the stars." We will remind ourselves that when God created this world with wisdom, he created such things as like the zodiac, which is what they're talking about here. The stars. All of the 70 nations are under these influences. The Jews, and only the Jews, the nation of Israel, was brought above this system, outside of this system that was set into place and continues to work by laws of cause and effect also. But not the Jews. Not the Jews. It's a supernatural situation. This is what happened. God took Avraham Avinu outside of the system and showed him the system. So when the Jews follow these laws and have a connection with God, they are outside of this. This is why the poor also didn't work. The poor that we talked about in the very first video, I believe. And that's why it's Purim. They have their plans according to their information, and God has his plans. The plan for the Jews is the redemption at the end of time, which we are in. What does it depend on? It depends on us returning to God. So don't worry about what happened today, he says. Mordecai was already, he was already honored. So he'll still hang today. Don't worry about it. And they said, that might work for every other people, that your luck is, up and their luck is down, but it doesn't work for the Jews. Their destiny is not bound by the stars. They are likened to both the dust and the stars. So Mordecai is a Jew who declares God's unity every day. Shema Israel. It's what Jews do every day. So are you a Jew? So he has access to the highest powers of creation. He is also a descendant of King Saul, who brought about the beginning of your people's downfall when he captured King Agag of Amalek. So again, Amalek's tradition, the tradition that he was talking about, was a tradition of Amalek. So we know that they have their traditions, especially Amalek, that they are supposed to destroy the Jews in every generation. And the tradition of the one singular nation of Israel is to pray to God and follow the Torah laws. That's their tradition from Amalek. Kill the Jews. Their tradition is important to them. Our tradition is important to us and for our very survival, in fact. So, he is also a descendant of King Saul. So it's not a run of bad luck. This is not a run of bad luck as you think. It's the beginning of your downfall. You might think that Mordecai will fall, but you will fall first. Don't think that it will be so easy to hang Mordecai. You yourself paraded him through the streets and announced that the king desired to honor him. That in itself is a great downfall for you. How could you dare even to think that you will hang a man who the king has just honored so greatly? The best thing for you to do would to go tear down the gallows and flee for your life. Hide from Mordecai and from the king. You know the history of the Jews. Even the greatest kings could not stand up before their God. You recall what happened to Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, which what happened there was that they were thrown into a fiery furnace, and they lived. Nebuchadnezzar threw them into a fiery furnace, and their God brought them out unharmed. Mordecai is also a member of that tribe. How do you expect to defeat him and his God? We also have very strong suspicions that Esther is a Jew. We know that she gave instructions to all the stores and the businesses in Shushan that they should be closed, and that this caused you to have to be the one to bathe and barber, to be the bath attendant and a barber. You will fall before Mordecai, and you will be hanged by Esther. Give your sons, even your sons will not escape. Go to the king and plead for mercy. Tell him that you did not know that Esther was Jewish, and now that you found out, you yourself will annul the decree. We also advise you to go to Mordecai and fall at his feet, begging for forgiveness. If you humble yourself now, you will have hope. You already fell before him against your will. Now fall before him willingly. He will have mercy on you, and you will be spared. 6:14. They were still speaking to him when the king's officers arrived, and they rushed Haman off to bring him to the party that Esther had made. Haman's advisors did not have time to finish speaking when they were interrupted by the king's officers. Haman wanted to wait a few moments and hear the rest of his men's advice, but they rushed him off against his will. Haman knew that no good would come to him at Esther's feast, and he hoped to find some excuse to absent himself. But there was no way that he could get the officers to listen to him. They did not invite him respectfully, but they rushed him off as if they were bringing a common criminal to prison. Hurry, hurry, said the captain. It's obvious that they were not going out of their way to show him respect. By now, everyone in the palace knew that he was a marked man. The soldiers pushed him along roughly, saying, "Some manners. keeping the king and queen waiting. Everything's ready, and he's sitting here at home talking to his friends. It was all as Providence had planned. A few minutes more, and Haman might have heard the rest of his wise men's advice, which was to flee, if the officers had come just a little later. But Haman would already have been on his way to the palace, begging the king for mercy. He would have explained that no one had any idea that Esther was Jewish. In Esther's presence at the party, he would have no such opportunity. Haman had many plans. Rather than come under Mordecai's power, he would hang himself. If his friends would not let him, he would flee. Yes, he had sons who were governors over distant provinces. Maybe he would even join them and foment a rebellion. Esther realized that she was dealing with a slippery customer, so she had told the officers to bring him without delay. They were not even to give him a chance to wash off the fetid mess that his daughter had dumped on him, nor to escape the capital to join his sons. She also gave orders that Haman's sons be immediately summoned to the capital before they could find out what had happened to their father. The orders were given directly by Esther so that none of them should be able to start a rebellion against the king. So, we will think about that. What is this story telling us with all of this situation, especially knowing that the Jews are not directed by luck and randomness and the zodiac, and we're above that. When are we above it? When we connect to Hashem, when we follow the laws. That's why we want to do that. That's why we keep insisting on that. That's why we keep learning Torah. That's why we keep doing all the things that we are doing. So hopefully, again, we are focusing on this, and we're going to do our best to cry out to God and to get the redemption, because we can see in our reality right now, it's similar to what happened in Purim. It doesn't look very positive if we're looking at our physical reality for the nation of Israel. It doesn't look positive.